Hey losers, I'm Coral. Welcome back to my channel. If you're tuning in for the first time, what you can expect to find here is me reading things that are strange, disturbing, dark. I read a lot of different genres, but do stick to those things. So a lot of the horror genre, but if you're into that, welcome to the party. Today I am going through my half-month wrap-up for July. I've got a couple things here to tell you about. And actually, I read a couple really good books so far this month that I'm excited to talk about. We can do my little book stats first. I read 8 books total so far this month. 3 of them were books that I owned previous to this year, so those were off of my TBR. I read 2,726 pages, which is about 181 pages per day. 3 of these were horror, 1 was a memoir, so that was nonfiction. I read 1 book that is contemporary, and 3 that are probably thrillers. 1 I was like, I don't know what this is, probably thriller. So there we go. The oldest book I read so far this month was published in 1974, and the most recent was published in 2024. To start with the couple that I don't have physical copies of, first, I am dying to tell you about Incidents Around the House by Josh Malerman. I read this because I had an early release copy of it that I was really pokey about getting around to until I went to get a physical copy at my local Barnes & Noble and they didn't fucking have it. I don't know if this is just my Barnes & Noble, but it seems like they don't get things on their release days unless it's like a super like generally popular book. Because they didn't even have, I mean, I had a copy of it, but I also looked for Paul Tremblay's horror movie. That wasn't there. I mean, I'm not expecting something obscure and indie to be there on its release date, but these are very popular in the horror genre. And these are books that make their way out of, you know, just the general horror audience into bigger. I mean, Josh Malerman has a fucking Netflix movie adaptation. You'd think his fucking book would be at my local Barnes & Noble, but it was not. So I was really dying to get to it, and I was like, well, I do have this e-copy of it. So I read it, and I read it, and I read it. It was, I like couldn't put it down. It was so just absorbing and good. This is from Bella's point of view, and I believe Bella is maybe like 6 or 7. She's pretty young. I would say more, she feels more like 5-6 years old to me, based on how her maturity feels when you're in her POV. And things are okay for Bella. Her parents, she can tell there is something happening with her parents' relationship, and they don't know that she's picking up on that, but kids are always, you know, smarter than adults give them credit for. And while this is happening, Bella is kind of leaning on this relationship because she's an only child. She's leaning on this relationship with this friend she's made who lives in her closet called Other Mommy. And at first, Other Mommy was a little bit scary, but then Other Mommy was fun to play with and stuff like that. But then Other Mommy started asking Bella this question: can I go into your heart? And Bella knows about like bodily autonomy and like, no, we don't let other people touch our body parts and things like that. And so this is like a red flag for Bella. Even though she's little, she's like, oh no, my parents have told me we don't do that. And so she's like, this is maybe something that a friend wouldn't ask. And so she's like, ooh, I don't know about that, Other Mommy. And Other Mommy seems to get kind of upset when Bella isn't letting her go into her heart. And what, you know, why does Other Mommy want to do this? And what the fuck is Other Mommy? I don't want to go too far into the plot because I think if you're going to pick this book up, you really should just go in without knowing very much. The synopsis is very, very vague. I mean, I think I really benefited from not knowing fucking shit about it, you know? And it was so, I really thought that this was so good. It was very spooky. I was reading it on my e-reader at night, and I was like laying on my side facing away from the door, and at one point I like just got like goosebumpy feeling, and I had to like look over my shoulder into like the dark corner of my room and be like, okay. And I had to look for like a second to really make sure that like there was fucking nothing there. This book really kind of got under my skin in a way that a horror book hasn't in a while. And it really doesn't happen to me very often. I read horror and I like it, but there is not very often, it doesn't happen often that something truly, you know, makes me check the dark corners of my room at night, you know? So, and I'm not saying that this will happen for everybody. Obviously, everyone's reader experience is different, but this is something that I can say happened to me with this book. Creepy. And I really wish I could get into why, but I think that would be taking away, you know, the potential experience from people who haven't read it. And maybe we could talk about it like on social media or something, if you follow me on Instagram, or if you want to follow me on Instagram and like send me a DM, we could chat about it. Because I think what made this so creepy is like really special, and I just can't share it though. I just can't share it. It would definitely be spoilery. But anyway, enough gushing. On to my next read, which was actually an audiobook I listened to that I rented from my library. This is Rebel Girl by Kathleen Hanna. This was read by Kathleen Hanna. She is the front for Bikini Kill, Le Tigre, The Julie Ruin. She is, you know, a pretty well-known name in punk, and this is a memoir about her time growing up and getting into music and becoming a feminist. Although probably she was always a feminist, she just didn't have the word for it, you know what I mean? So her childhood, going to college, you know, what made her take the path that she did, the paths that she did. I really liked this, and I think that, you know, of course, memoirs being read by the author, really just nonfiction being read by the author, is just so much more meaningful, I think, because they've done this work and now they get to share it with you. I really love that. I think that this is really insightful, especially because she was really integral in starting the Riot Grrrl movement in the 90s, and some of that kind of went astray in a weird way, and she talks about like what her intentions were and how she understands where the missteps were in that movement. And she's just really insightful, you know, and she's not somebody who stands up and is like, I did everything right in my life. She's very humble. I just really enjoyed this memoir a lot. She talks about so much music, and it was so cool, like, one, learning about new bands to check out, and two, hearing her talk about bands I already love and being like, oh, I love them. So cool. So that was great. If you love music, if you love music memoirs, musician memoirs, I guess, this is one that you should check out. Oh, right. So next on my list is Let's Go Play at the Atoms by Wendell W. Johnson. This was originally published in 1974. A copy of that is extremely difficult to get your hands on, especially because of the notoriety, the infamy this novel has. But this was reprinted in, I think, like 2020 by Valancourt, and that is obviously the edition I have, the Paperbacks from Hell reissue. So I'm very grateful that they did that, because otherwise I don't think I would have ever gotten my hands on a copy. They are wildly expensive unless you are very, 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 very lucky and you find someone who just really does not know what they have on their hands, which sometimes happens, but really very often, especially now, does not happen very often at all. So this boy is... When I picked this up, I was like, is this gonna be one of those novels? And in my head, I was thinking about The Girl Next Door by Jack Ketchum. That everybody is like, oh, it's so shocking, it's so terrible. Because I read The Girl Next Door, and it was just a story I had heard before. And maybe that's because I had heard the story before, because it's really just a retelling of a true crime case that I've heard over and over again, which is really terrible. But then he just rewrote that, and it's like, I know that, and like the real story is so much more terrible. So I was like, okay, you know, when I read The Girl Next Door, and I feel like this was giving me the same vibes as The Girl Next Door, and so I was like, am I gonna pick this up and just be like, oh, it's so shocking? And so I kind of put it off for a long time. But let me tell you, this book is very bleak. This book is bleak. This book is one of those books where you finish it and you want to fucking chuck it out a window for multiple reasons, which I cannot get into. This book makes you want to punch every 12-year-old you see right in the fucking solar plexus. So this is about Barbara. She is a 20-year-old babysitter who is staying for the week at the house of the kids she's babysitting for, the Adams, and the parents are out of the country, so like kind of inaccessible. This takes place in the 70s, so like there are no cell phones, and being out in the country, it's like even more isolated. There's a couple like neighbor kids who live around, but since it's in the country, they're not next door. Barbara wakes up a couple mornings into her babysitting stint, and she finds that she is tied to a chair, and she had been chloroformed in the night, and the kids she's babysitting for have come up with this idea with their like country friends, and they just thought it would be fun to pull one over on the babysitter, like an adults versus kids things, even though this young lady is barely an adult. And things just escalate wildly out of control from there. I thought that this book was unique because it really spends a lot of time with all of the characters. You really know what everyone is thinking and what all of their motivations are. Even though it seems mindless, it's not. I mean, it is, but it's also not. Logically it is, but like in their minds it's not. And it gets really bad, and you really just want to scream. You want to scream and scream, like, why are you doing this? You need to stop. This is a bad idea. And it's really interesting to see how, you know, all these, what all these players are thinking, what their opinions on what's happening is. There is one scene in here that is really troubling because of the implications of like how victims react to things, and it's like, that's just not how that is. And if you've read this book, I think you fucking know. And I think in this day and age, almost anybody who reads that, I hope anybody who reads that would know that like that is just absolutely not how it would happen. I sincerely hope. And I also really wonder, like, what was this guy thinking when he wrote this part? I don't know. I really don't. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess it's an exploitation book, and despite that, I enjoyed it. I didn't enjoy that part. I thought that part it just was really unnecessary. I don't know. If you've read it, I think you know exactly what I mean. Next, I would like to talk about Penance by Eliza Clark. This was published in 2023. And I really enjoyed this. I really enjoyed this because you just don't actually know, no matter where you are in this, like what is true and what's not. Right away, before you even get into the story, it says like this was thought to be a nonfiction novel at first. It's like, it's meta, right? Like, we are reading a journalist's account of this event. But as it turns out, the journalist used some sources that weren't meant to be factual, and he definitely has a dubious past as far as the ways he gets information and things like that. So you don't know what's the truth and what isn't. So you're really unsure of everything when you're reading this. So I liked this, but I do also feel like my brain was maybe overanalyzing everything. Like my brain didn't need that information right away, where it's like, you don't know what's true and what's not. Because then I was like, is this true? Is this true? Do I think this is true? Do I think this is true? I did enjoy it, but I don't think my brain needs any more reason to question everything that's happening. It was really good though. Although I noticed, I mean, right away I noticed that my formatting, I wonder, is anyone else's formatting in this Harper Perennial edition weird like this? Like, there's not a normal margin at the top. I don't know if it's because there are footnotes. Like, is that to make space for the footnotes that are occasionally in here? Maybe that's it, but it was kind of weird. It must be because of the footnotes, I'm guessing. But this has some mixed media in it. There are like blog posts, some text messages, interviews, things like that in it now and then. It reads like a true crime novel. It really does. And I should tell you what this is about. Jesus. This is about a crime that happened in 2016 where a 16-year-old girl was tortured and then set on fire by 3 of her classmates. And you puzzle out why that happened. Yeah, I mean, why that happened. There are a lot of moving parts in this and a lot of motivations in this. And I found it really fascinating and sad, even though it's fictional, of course. I mean, for real fictional. And I really liked it, and I'm excited to pick up Eliza's debut novel, Boy Parts, which I have sitting on my bookshelf. Then, I also read another 2024 release. This is A Better World by Sarah Langan. I've been so excited about this. I read Sarah Langan's last novel, Good Neighbors, I think in 2021 or 2022, and it was one of my very favorite books that year and still remains one of my very favorite books. It was so just wicked. And this one, it really seems like it could be set in like the same world almost, just maybe a couple years later. Because in this, well, like at the end of Good Neighbors, there's a like climate crisis going on. And in this, there is some sort of, you know, like worldwide climate crisis going on where, you know, the air is terrible and everything is so expensive. There is a resource shortage and things like that. It's hard to find food even if you have the money to buy it. The family we're following in this, what are their last names again? The Farmer Bowens, that's right. They need to move, and quickly. The father is out of a job and he is the one who makes a higher income in their household, and it's like, where are we gonna go? We cannot afford to live here, even though they're like in an apartment, and he is like a numbers genius and he works for like it seems like a good company, but they're still like in an apartment in the city and like can't afford shit. So they're approached by someone from a company town, which is something I don't hear about very often here anymore. I don't know if that's really a thing anymore, but basically the town has one industry and it's like everyone works for this industry and the quality of life is great there. They really don't use money. Everything is just, you work for the industry and everything's provided for you. So this is great for them. The air is like much better. The school system seems good. Their kids are going to be taken care of. There's health care and they're able to get in, but like also it's a little bit culty seeming, and right away they're just like shunned by the people who live there, and it seems like they don't get outsiders very often. And they also have these like big, like peacock-sized white birds that they used to be a species in somewhere in the eastern part of the world, and then they became extinct or something, and this town has like brought them back from extinction because they're a great source of protein, and now they eat them all the time, but also they just like live all over the place, and like every household has one in their yard and they're supposed to like feed it all the time, but they are just like gross and dirty and shit everywhere. I don't know, it's just like really strange. You know, like I said, they're shunned. People won't talk to them. They try to be really nice, but like everyone is so mean. It's just like this weird suburbia gone wrong. But finally, the wife Linda gets accepted kind of into the community because she previously worked as a pediatrician, and wouldn't you know, they kind of need one for their free clinic that is outside of the community. They use this to kind of garner goodwill outside of the community to use for like the day workers who don't live in the community but come into work, right? And those people kind of fucking hate the people inside of this community because they're fucking weirdos, obviously. So Linda's now kind of accepted into the community, but it all seems really weird, and like there are some sinister undertones, and of course I could explain more, but if you liked Good Neighbors, you'll like A Better World. If you like suburbia gone wrong type of books, you'll like this. It's dystopian and thrillery and strange, and it's a great story about family, and I really fucking like this. I think Sarah Langan's writing is just like so easy to just really get into immediately, and I love her books. I love her books so much. All right, next I read Dare Me by Megan Abbott. This came out in 2020. 2012. And I picked this up, I saw it at my library, and I wanted to try more of Megan Abbott's books because I read her book, The Turnout, and I really liked it. And this one has very similar vibes where we're following a group of young women, a group of teenagers in this one, in a really tight-knit group. In this case, they're cheerleaders on a squad in high school. Man, they're kind of vicious with each other. And it used to be like, you know, okay, they were mean, but it was okay until this new coach comes in. And before, the cheer captain had really been running everything. She was a high school student, but now this new coach comes in, and the coach wants to actually do the coaching job, unlike the last coach. And now the cheer captain's pissed off and vindictive about this, and it leads down this path where maybe this high school girl is kind of looking for dirt on this adult woman, and things just really escalate. So I liked the relationships in this a lot. There is a death in this book, and the mystery surrounding that death I really didn't give a shit about. So I didn't like it as much as The Turnout. This is really like, you know, 3-star territory for me. I finished it. I enjoyed it. I liked the relationships in it, like I said, the most. I think that's what carried it. I think, you know, the whole point of it was this mystery behind the death, and that I just didn't really hear about. So it was okay. I also picked up Allegedly by Tiffany D. Jackson. This came out in 2017, and this is contemporary that maybe tiptoes into thriller territory. This is about a teenager named Mary who's been incarcerated for, about half of her life at this point, even though she's, well, no, she's like 15, isn't she? So not quite half of her life, but she has been in prison since she was 9 years old. And you're wondering, what the fuck could a 9-year-old possibly do to end up in prison? And that is, Mary is black, and she is accused of killing a white baby that her mother was babysitting. And of course, this was sensationalized, and everyone thinks Mary is like borderline psychotic. Is Mary crazy? Is Mary's mother crazy? Like, what happened? You really just don't even know exactly what happened until very late in the book. And Mary doesn't even really care to let you know what happened until Mary gets pregnant. And at that point, she's like, oh, I'm pregnant. I've got to set the record straight about what happened that night. So, you know, there's a whole lot of shit that Mary's got to do to get her story out, because who's gonna believe her after what she allegedly did? I liked this. I thought the writing was great. It felt a little bit long to me, but I was along for the ride, and I thought that the end was so excellent. It really made me question everything that I had read. It was really, really excellently told, and I'm really excited to read more of Tiffany D. Jackson's other books. Alright, and finally, I read The Paleontologist by Luke Dumas. This came out in 2023. This is about a young man named Simon, and he is a paleontologist. He is recently going back to his hometown museum, the museum where he grew up, to take up the role of paleontologist at their museum after their resident paleontologist has, I don't know, he's just fucking old, right? He's old and he's retired. But this is kind of maybe a problem for Simon, because this is also the museum where his sister, when they were children, disappeared and her remains have never been found. She's never been found. Is she alive? Is she dead? No one knows. So this is like a huge source of trauma for Simon. Why did he do this? Is he doing this to find some sort of closure? Is he doing this because he thinks his sister might be alive? Is he doing this because he thinks her remains might be somewhere there? We don't know. So Simon starts at this museum and he finds the bones from a dinosaur that he's never seen before. It could be a new discovery, right? That his predecessor had been working on, and he is super excited about this. He finds this journal from his predecessor, this like diary going back years from when he discovered this, and he's going to set up this like exhibit and stuff. And so that's basically what we're reading about in this. There is really like two parts in this plot. There is putting together the exhibit from this dinosaur and the spooky things happening in this museum at night, and also the mystery of the disappearance of Simon's sister. And one of these definitely interested me more than the other, and that is the dinosaur aspect. I thought the dinosaur stuff was way more interesting than the sister's disappearance. When we get to the bottom of it, I thought that the motivation was just kind of weird. It didn't really make sense to me. I mean, logically it made sense. I was like, that's all of this for that? But the dinosaur stuff was really interesting, so I don't know, it was kind of a toss-up. I like the dinosaur stuff. The disappearance of the sister stuff, just fine. I also didn't really love Simon. He was just kind of whimpery and whiny the whole book. Not somebody I would have kept as an employee if I were the museum. But that's just my opinion. So, those are the 8 books I've read so far this month. I've got a couple more on my docket, so keep an eye out for the next couple towards the end of the month. As always, I'd love to know if you've read any of these and what you thought about them. I'd love to know what you've read so far this month that you're really excited about. Take a look at my link tree for links to my social media, to my Pango bookshop. I'm slowly adding books there from my unhaul. What else? I've got affiliate links to things such as Libro FM, which is an audiobook service. So if you're interested in any of that, that's where you'll find it. All of that is in my description of this video. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you later. Goodbye.